Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me tonight, Fox 40's Sean Cunningham. Sean, how are you?
I am better. It looks like the storm has subsided. There's about 92 of them on the way. If we're not out of a drought by the end of January, I'm moving. Anyway, I'm fantastic. I'm thrilled that we are live, right? We're live, right?
We're live. I believe we're live.
Yes. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Sean loves the live shows. And of course, Sean and I are joined by Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, how are you?
I'm good. Happy to be indoors and didn't have to go anywhere today. The drive home from the stadium yesterday, the freeway was not the most enjoyable experience, but made it through.
Got a little white knuckle going on? Yep.
Yeah. Not a blast. Wasn't on the freeway for long. I can't imagine your driving experience, but hopefully all listeners are safe and good.
Yeah. Okay. Have you ever got your car fixed? I don't know how we've missed this, how we haven't had this continued conversation.
It is actually about to be fixed finally.
Huh.
Okay.
So what do you do?
What for right now?
Yeah, are you running around on a wrecked car, or you have to borrow somebody's car? Or
I used a friend's car yesterday, yes.
Okay.
Oh.
So
in those conditions.
About to be good. That's what made it worse as well, is that it wasn't a car I was super familiar with. So,
all right.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting.
I have a confession. I live in an area that's surrounded by trees and branches, and I think James froze there for a moment with the funniest look on his face. He's back now.
I don't think I froze. I was just making strange faces.
Oh, okay. No, so I actually left my car in one of the car garages around the arena last night for fear that, a tree might fall on it, because literally you can't park without being under a tree. So for all these people telling me that there was going to be all this stuff going on, fortunately it wasn't bad around my area, but my car was safe in the garage, so I felt good.
And there was no beam to help guide people, which didn't help.
Oh,
we were beamless.
We were beamless in Sacramento. So my drive home was pretty crazy. It's about, last night it was an hour, maybe a few minutes more, just because you had to take it slow. I got blown all over the road. Like, the minivan was getting pushed.
Sean.
Oh yeah, that's all right.
Come on.
It's the
family show.
When
it's a family show, Sean.
When you hear something funny, you got to react to it. And I heard something funny, so I know I'm not the only one. Go ahead, James. Please continue.
The minivan was tilting. Like, I didn't know what was going to happen. I made it home fine. It was fine. It didn't really start raining until after I got home, and then it was pretty wild today. This was a lot of rain today. Yeah. Anyway, so let's get down to it. We got tons to talk about, but we will field your questions as soon as Sean can grow up and stop hating the rain. But we are live tonight on YouTube, so if you're watching, feel free to give us a thumbs up. That usually helps the algorithm. And then subscribe. We just keep gaining subscribers here on the Kings Beat podcast, and we are always happy to have more people join us on this journey. Outside of that, make sure to become a subscriber to the Kings Beat. Go to thekingsbeat.com, become a premium subscriber to get invites to things like the happy hour and to get everything unlocked. Happy hour will be later this month, but we are working on that already. So hopefully we can make an announcement pretty quick. I want to start to show up. I want to give a shout out to our good friend Gary Gerald. Gary missed the game last night. He was just under the weather. He sounded a little rough on Tuesday night in Utah. Got home and missed the game. And then a big shout out to our friend Jason Ross, who stepped in and filled some very, very big shoes that Gary Gerald was not able to, show up in against the Hawks. So hopefully everything goes well with the G-man. But he's got a cold, and sometimes you gotta call in sick, and that's the way it goes. I don't know. What are your guys' first impressions? Well, we talked on Monday. The Kings got a big win in Utah. They got a pretty meh loss against the Atlanta Hawks, once again losing to a team that is below 500 at home, and that's not usually great. But let's start with the win. The third win in 4 games by the Sacramento Kings by a combined 4 points. Any big takeaways from the win over the Jazz?
It's got to be De'Aaron's 22 points in the fourth quarter, right? He totally took over down the stretch of that game. Ended up hitting the game winner. I thought that Laurie's shot looked really close. Didn't have much time with 0.4 to be able to catch and do the entire turnaround that he did make, but didn't end up counting. But De'Aaron just totally took over. He's been clutch for this team all year long. But I think this was the most obvious example of just to put up that sheer volume of 22 points in a single quarter, let alone the fourth. I think it's just phenomenal from him. And he's had great finishes. As always, his mid-range has been great. He's not even really doing it on threes. Like I think the beginning of the year, we saw him shooting the 3-ball pretty well. That hasn't been great as of late, but he's still totally finding a way to get it done and makes me feel a little bit more confident down the stretch of games.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add to that. I mean, De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis are really just the story of the Kings' success, not only for this season. We just continue to talk about just how well they played, and yeah, Fox in the fourth quarter, that's a thing. I mean, you should start to see T-shirts about it, bumper stickers, anything. It's unfortunate that
Fourth quarter Fox.
Right. It's just unfortunate that the success of those two players haven't really shown up in the All-Star voting. I mean,
Austin Reeves has been really good, Sean.
Say that again?
Austin Reeves has been really good.
Kevon Looney and
right.
Yeah, man. There's a lot of guys that make you scratch your head, but there's some, fan bases out there that are doing everything they can to vote, and hopefully Sacramento can figure out a way to do it and get one of their guys at least respectable numbers in the voting. I don't think any of us have visions of grandeur of those guys getting voted in, but you'd like to kind of see them up at least in the top 10. And if you had to pick one, I mean, you'd think that it would be the guy who's not only leading the league in rebounds and double-doubles. I mean, Sabonis should definitely be that guy. As far as the 2 games are concerned, yeah, I mean, that Utah game was wild. I actually, the first thing I thought of, I think I even tweeted it, was just how many heartbreaking losses the Jazz have been a part of. And you can contrast that with the Kings a little bit, because we were talking about it. I think that was my overreaction earlier this week, is that the Kings just don't quite look like themselves, at least what you've seen in many parts of the season. They're still very, very competitive. The defense is certainly relaxed a bit, for lack of better terms.
It's been horrible. Is that what you mean?
It's been really bad, man.
Like relaxed. Yeah.
The ball movement is a little bit concerning, but yeah, I mean, you get that game in Utah, for whatever reason, the bench doesn't show up in scoring very often. I think they finished with under 10 points off the bench. You want to see your bench definitely contribute more, especially when this team is known for being this high-powered, efficient offense. And I was thrilled with the result of that game, in the sense that not only that the Kings won, but it was pretty spectacular fashion. And they're in so many of these down to the wire games. It was fun talking to Sabonis last night, where he's just like, every guy's talked about how much they've learned about, it's a good thing that we're in so many of these close contests. And he's like, yeah, but we shouldn't be. Like, we should be stepping on their throats. And said like a true veteran all-star player with that type of mentality. So last night's game, I know it bothered a lot of people. I wasn't really totally bothered by it. I thought, there's some things you can certainly pick apart, but ultimately Atlanta came in and smacked them in the mouth. I like the resolve that the Kings had to answer a 7-0 run with I think it was 11-2 run of their own. And my only criticism there, and I believe I completely agree with what Malik Monk said, is that this team completely got comfortable with that, and they got smacked again. So hopefully they learn from it, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that game, like, while it doesn't come down to one possession or one play, or, typically, it's kind of a bummer, because you have these 2 guys who have carried you all season long. I mean, let's be honest, this is the Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox show. Domantas Sabonis is, like, you just write in with a Sharpie, that he's going to put up like 18 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 assists every single night. And it's some variance on that. And he's had, I don't know how many near triple doubles, but I'm going to guess it's probably like 6, where he's either a rebound or an assist or 2 assists or a point away from a triple double, which has happened so many times this year. But for him to miss those 2 crucial free throws, it would have put the Kings up 3 late in the game. And then De'Aaron Fox to just get picked. He just a clean pick by DeJounte Murray, and just like you gave up the game-winning basket, basically the nail in the coffin. Those were pretty stunning. I was caught off guard by just that happened to those 2 guys, because they're usually so locked in. And I think at some point the Kings, of course, they're going to need someone else to step up. And we start seeing, 4 guys scored 20 points in that loss to Atlanta last night. So you can't just say it's just the 2 of them. But when they go to the bench the last, I don't know, week, like it's nothing. They had a game with 8 points. You talked about it last night where they have 10. I don't know what's going on with the bench, but it's becoming an issue. And it just feels like the second that Domas steps off the floor, this team can't function properly. And not even, I don't even know if they can function. You're just trying to hold on and hope that you've built enough of a lead that you can go to the bench for 5 or 6 minutes, and then you got to go back to them. And I don't want to put it on one position or one player, but it really does feel like it doesn't matter who is playing the backup center spot. They just can't do what he's doing at all. They can't match what he's doing. They can't keep the flow of the game like he does. And it's so obvious that, like clearly I've been a proponent of this for a while, but I think it's time that they need to start looking outside the roster and seeing if they can come up with someone else. Because I don't know that this group, they're starting to regress. The defense is starting to regress. And part of that's because that second unit is just, it's not being able to hold its weight.
The coach went with Richaun in the first half. Obviously didn't like what he was seeing, and then went with Trey Lyles as the backup 5 in the second half for that game against Atlanta, and actually talked about it mainly having to do with the offense in postgame, and saying that it kind of just wasn't clicking the same or the way that he wanted it to while he was out there. And then tried Terrence Davis in that first half, which I thought was interesting when Casey Alcala had a little bit of a good game against Utah just the night prior, and then Terrence Davis is the one coming in and checking Trae Young. Terrence Davis got 2 quick fouls and didn't play in the second half. So even beyond that backup center, Trey Lyles seems to be more of a consistent at this point, but still has his question marks and days where he's not amazing out there. It's really the 2 guys off the bench are Davion Mitchell and Malik Monk, and Davion's been playing great. Malik has been really struggling as of late. He had that, I believe, 33-point game against, is it Denver, if I'm remembering correctly?
I think it was one of the Denver games.
I think it was the second Denver game 30, where we 30, had 3 guys with 30, right? But in the last 9 games, which is since the Kings have come back from that extended road trip and these 2 road games and the one they just played last night in Atlanta, 9 games now, Malik Monk's at 12 points on 37% from the field and 24% from 3. A little over 2 turnovers and just under 4 assists. Part of me wonders, does that have anything to do with him not playing consistently with the same guys in that backup unit? And maybe that makes things difficult on him as somebody who likes to get his teammates involved just as much as he's going to go get his own. But Malik hasn't been great off the bench either. And that certainly doesn't help when he feels like one of the 2 guys you want to be able to rely on there.
That's actually a really good question. I was thinking about that. I was wondering about that just now when you posed it, and I don't have an answer. I feel like it's mainly just because this is Malik Monk, and he can be a very streaky shooter, and hopefully you're closer to a moment where he kind of breaks out. But I do feel there's something there to it about the people he's playing with. I think you might be onto something there. But I kind of sound like a broken record, but I feel if Malik Monk doesn't have a good game, it's harder for this team to win. His presence needs to be there because he's such an infectious player, and I don't mean that necessarily totally from a scoring standpoint, although you'd like it to be. If he's not scoring, the playmaking has to be there, and the playmaking just hasn't been there. So I kind of alluded to the fact that they'll be on this homestand and have some ample time for some practice, and that's, I think, going to be very important because they just don't look right. I've used the word clunky. They don't look like themselves. I think there's some beat-up guys. They've been playing essentially every other day, 3 games in 4 nights, a lot of these bunched up together games. So not to make excuses, but it's just part of the NBA schedule. You also just look around at the league right now. It's pretty wild. I mean, both nationally televised games on TNT tonight were both dreck. And
guys are going for 50 almost every night.
Yeah, I mean,
it's 50 and 70 and like.
But you're also starting to see a ton of blowouts. I mean, these games that you're hoping are going to be interesting just aren't. Someone just brought it up there, and they kind of beat me to it. I think it might be a time to, go back to the Chimezie Metu experiment a little bit more. That seems to be when this team is at their most cohesive, even if he has a kind of a shitty game. So I'd like to kind of see that again. And there's a lot of DeMarcus Cousins chatter in the chat, as there seems to be all the time. I don't know, man. That's not going to help you defensively, but I'm a big Boogie fan. So, yeah,
I just don't think the Kings are ever even going to consider that going down that road. I don't see it.
I do think that there's you've talked about looking outside the roster. There's so many names, a lot of the usual suspects that come up that we've talked about, and just none of them really excite me too much. But that's also why they'll probably be available. So, it's going to take some creativity, I think, in order to get better in that position.
This is that moment where Brennan offers up Nerlens Noel.
Kelly Olynyk
shakes his head.
Kelly Olynyk.
I like Kelly Olynyk.
One guy that can jump over a phone book. Phone book. And another guy that can't take a punch at all.
Hey,
just gets pushed around.
You're recommending the ugliest jump shot I've ever seen in my life. So,
one of the worst free throw shooters of all time. Yeah, but I mean, look, I think the Kings need somebody that can. You got to get someone that can play, that can fit in, but can actually be good enough to play a reasonable amount of minutes and fits the system that you're playing, and that's not easy. I've been in this massive debate. I don't know why, but I guess the good people of Portugal are pissed at the Kings again because Neemias Queta is not playing, and because I've even had people say, "Oh, Mike Brown is a liar," and we saw the one big game, right? The offensive game from Neemias Queta where he goes 5 of 5 from the field for 10 points, and then he gets 3.5 minutes the next game, and that was it. It was over. The experiment was over. Even I remember Jason Anderson looked over at me and goes, I think the Neemias Queta experience is over because they brought in Richaun Holmes. And it's okay, look, I think that I get some of the angst and some of the reason why fans in Portugal, fans in Neemias Queta would be confused by why he plays, why he puts up 10 points in one game and then barely plays in the next, and then he's out of the rotation again. But I think the 5 of 5 from the field game might have been the worst thing possible for Queta and for people who follow Queta. Yeah. Because it gave you this illusion that something magical was happening. And the fact is he's 7 foot something and he got 5 wide open looks to dunk the ball. There wasn't a jumper in there. And the other problem was that he had missed out on 3 or 4 clear rebounds before that he just couldn't corral, and he wasn't making the impact on that end of the floor. And while I guess you could say that Mike Brown said he was going to give Neemias an opportunity, the opportunity came and went so fast because while he was saying he would give Neemias an opportunity, he also gave us this list of things that you had to do in order to remain the backup center, which was rebound, play defense without fouling, do the dirty work, set screens, help your team defensively, block shots if you can, but not out of position. He's given us this list, and it's not just Neemias that can't do it. It's the same thing with Richaun Holmes. It's the same thing with Chimezie Metu towards the end of his streak. And it feels like everyone wants somebody at that position to score, and that's just not what the position is. The position is to do all of the dirty work and to allow other people to score and to be selfless. And so when guys do score, that seems to be like the worst thing for any of them. Remember, Chimezie Metu had those 2 games in a row where he almost put up double doubles. Like I think he did have one double double, and then he had a 10 and 8 or 12 and 8. And next thing you know, like he was looking to score all the time, and he was out of the rotation 2 games later. So it's kind of a weird situation that they're in. But I mean, you guys get what I'm saying here. It's not that Keita's chance will come around again, most likely, but it might not be right now. It might not be till the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Keita's still had some positional stuff. Definitely the hands that you kind of mentioned on those rebounds. There were a couple that it looked like he could have gotten more offensive rebounds than he was able to come away with. And it's just things that'll come with time. Like, I don't think that it's anything overly concerning with Keita either. He's just still young and getting used to everything. Like, I think this is a very natural kind of development curve for where Keita was picked and the sort of body transformation he's gone through since the time that he started at Utah State. So I think it's very normal. I'm with Sean, actually. Like, I've never been a huge fan of Keita, but like I would try it again. You're clearly trying everything. I thought that it had moments that it looked okay at the beginning of the year. Mike Brown is very clearly searching. He's used that term earlier this year. And when he's searching, he really is taking a lot of quick looks at people. And it seems like the leash when he is out there searching and looking for guys to fill certain spots is pretty short.
Yeah, I mean, the you're not going to replace Domas, and that's not what they're trying to do. You're just hoping to kind of, you'd like to see positive momentum, but you're just hoping that they can just hold down the fort while he gets a break. But I also don't think that they can afford to play Domas 40 minutes a game. I really don't. I don't think that's ideal for any of them. So he's got to figure it out. And I think every one of those guys offers something different. And it's unfortunate it just doesn't really fit. They're going to have a hole in that lineup based on what he does and what you're hoping, to have around him. Because, I mean, you watch Domas. I mean, he's playing point center half the time. He's bringing the ball up court even more so than we've seen in the beginning of the season. A lot of times it was situational. In that fourth quarter, he's just like, nah, I'm bringing it up. So I don't know. There's just, you don't really have someone who can hold down the fort in the meantime. I know, plenty of people have thrown out, Nemi, obviously, he's just not there. Alex Len, while he's a little longer in the tooth, he's just not good. And, you've got Richaun Holmes, who you've given a pretty solid sample size to in terms of games, but now he's not getting the minutes. So you have to make the most of your 5-minute spurt. And sometimes you don't get much more than that. And that's what's really unfortunate. How do you expect to find a player who can be impactful, make the most of those opportunities, and be content with the role? And it's on pin. Those guys are on pins and needles. And you made a good point earlier, Brenden. I was wondering the same thing. You've got a guy like, KZ, who had I know it was a back-to-back, and maybe personnel is different with Atlanta than was with Utah, but he has the defensive player of the game chain and then doesn't play the next game. And you go with Terrence Davis, and it just looked kind of clunky. I thought there was plenty of times out there late in the game, especially, and it proved costly on one of them when Keegan Murray ended up with the foul and put, I think it was Trae Young at the free throw line, but I thought that could have been KZ Okpala on there defensively at a certain point, and go positional basketball like you do when you sub out Davion Mitchell so many times in that fourth quarter as well.
Yeah, I think like it keeps coming back. You said something about like if you can't figure out the flow of the game really quickly at that center spot, you're just not gonna get an opportunity to keep playing. And I think it's really harsh because you're comparing like anyone to Domas, and no one is going to be able to fill what he's doing. And then we have this other element that like the Kings are not going to wait around for a player like Keita to figure out how to play at the NBA level. And that's really tough. So that's why they've kept him around a lot, to have him at practice, to make sure that he's getting as much time as possible with the team. They have they've had moments where they've stuck him in there and played him. But at the end of the day, like Keegan Murray is the one player on this roster that you're kind of giving a long leash to. And the team's just not going to do it with somebody that, I mean, Keegan is a number 4 pick in the 2022 NBA draft. you're going to let him make a few mistakes here and there, like you're talking about, Sean, where he fouls Trae Young for the and one down the stretch, which was just so costly. But the Kings don't have the opportunity here because of their place in the standings, because they want to go to the playoffs and all that, to wait for somebody to figure it out. Somebody just has to go in there and do it. And that's kind of a weird thing because, you'd hope that they'd give somebody a little bit longer stint. But I get it. At the same time, like, we're watching the game, and when they pull Nimi or they pull Richaun and they try someone different, none of us are going, I wonder why that happened. Every single game, you're like, oh, yeah, I saw it. See you, Richaun. You're out. Like, and I get it. Like, I don't, we're not trying to be rude here to players, but, like, there are moments where each of these guys it just isn't working, and you go to a different direction. And you would think that eventually Mike Brown would let somebody play through it, but I don't know. I don't know that he's going to. I think that he's probably asking the front office, like, what are we going to do here?
I'm sure of it. I'm sure he has. And, it's tough to overanalyze every single game like this. And you obviously see where the deficiencies are, so it makes it easy to do so. But look, Mike Brown knows this team a hell of a lot better than the three of us and anybody on this chat. So I see a lot of people always trying to second guess, and that's kind of our job too, is to question why and figure out what the thinking and rationale is behind it. But ultimately, it falls on Mike Brown, and I think sometimes he can get guilty. He's a little guilty of being a little too cute with it, but for the most part, I feel like he's got it pretty dialed in. He knows this. He knows what he has in his team. And one of the things I like about him is the fact he doesn't really do a lot of responding to what the other team is doing. He tends to try to have a solid rotation and then play game manager. And he usually is the coach that punches first. And I really dig that about him.
Yeah, I mean, I thought like the Trae at the 5 example is one of those, like just trying to get creative, that nothing had been working. Maybe that had a little bit to do with you feel a little bit more comfortable doing that when it's against a lineup that has John Collins at the 5 on the other side. But we also saw him do it in a different matchup that had a little bit more size. I actually think it was against Jokic in one of those Denver games that we saw a little bit of Lyles and HB kind of sharing responsibilities at the 5 and just trying to like maintain your offensive output and being willing to sacrifice a little bit defensively. But it is crazy how much time we spend talking about a backup 5, understandably so, when there's 3 or 4 potential options and none of them work.
It's been more than that, Brenden. While we were sitting here, I'm thinking, okay, you're right. They just tried Trey Lyles. They tried Chimezie Metu. They tried Alex Len. They tried Neemias Queta. They've tried Richaun Holmes. That's 5 dudes. They've like run 5 different dudes out there, and I get it. Like, Mike, it's not just that they aren't Domas. It's that the second you pull Sabonis off the floor, you're going to lose. I get it. I'm watching the same thing he is. Like, man, we had a 12-point lead. Now it's down to 4. That's not good. And you're looking around like, well, what else are we going to try? I don't know. He's tried just about everything. Sometimes he'll go with like a 4-guard set just to try to mix it up and try to something different. So yeah, I think it's interesting. And people have asked, like, the Kings don't have a roster spot right now. It's January 10th. That's the date that I keep getting. I know last time I think we discussed, I think it was January 7th, but I think it's January 10th is a date that all NBA contracts become guaranteed. So the Kings have to make decisions. We talked about this last week or on Monday with Shima Moneki and KZ Okpala and Matthew Dellavedova, whether they want to keep those guys. But past January 10th, if they waive them between now and then the second half of their contracts aren't guaranteed. But more importantly for the Kings, because this isn't really about money as much as it is about roster flexibility, if you keep one of those guys past January 10th, and you need a roster spot for something, then you have to end up buying somebody out and paying that money. And again, I don't think it's as much a money thing as like we just saw the Boston Celtics today trade Noah Vonleh to the San Antonio Spurs with a bunch of cash. So the Celtics were trying to get under the luxury tax, and they gave up a bunch of money to the Spurs to take on the remaining part of Vonleh's contract. And those are things that you can do. You can pick up second round picks. You can do other things when you have an open roster spot. When we get past January 10th, but before what is it, February 9th? Is that? I think that's a trade deadline. Anyway, yeah, it's the Kings can't just go out and pick up DeMarcus Cousins today. They would have to make a roster move in order to do it. And either way, I don't think they're actually going to do anything with the with a guy like Cousins. I don't think they're going to do anything. Rory says they have to waive them by the 7th in order to let them clear waivers by the 10th. Okay, yeah, I just know that if Dellavedova is still on the roster on January 10th, then his contract becomes guaranteed. So you might be right that the waiver window, but either way, like I looked it up and the date I came up with was January 10th was the guaranteed contract date, right? So I think we're talking about the same thing, just the semantics of it. Kings have Lakers coming up, right?
They do.
Like, is this a big game? Because it feels like it's kind of a big game. I don't know why, but it feels like it is. Like the Kings are, what are they, 7 and 8 over their last 15?
You know what's weird about that game too? So LeBron didn't play. He was out with like non-COVID illness last night. Lakers win. Obviously didn't have AD either. And they're going to play.
It's LeBron's fault.
Yeah, and they're going to be on a second night of back-to-back because they're going to be playing Atlanta tomorrow night as we record this on Thursday to a live audience. Thank you for joining, folks. But in case you're listening on the podcast form, yeah, it's they're going to be playing Atlanta on Friday, so they're going to be on second night of back-to-back. I wouldn't know. I didn't say it's a big game, but no, you better take care of business. You got 2 days off before that game, and you've got a lot of time to correct some things. So, plus it's the Lakers. My philosophy hasn't changed. You should come out and absolutely slaughter this team. That's what I said in the first time they played them, and I think they did that. So, they need to really take advantage of this stretch. I know they don't. It's hard to think about that. Like even I was talking to a coworker of mine, and they thought, they're like, man, they agreed with the sentiment that this could be, the moment where you look back at the end of the year and depend upon the success and the failure of the season, you go, man, this was either a area of opportunity you capitalized upon, or this one was kind of a wasted opportunity. And if they don't capitalize on it and build that equity and some of these wins and add upon your above 500 record, it's going to make the sledding a lot tougher the rest of the season, because then you have to really steal some games. So, yeah, I think this is kind of the proverbial do your business or get off the pot kind of a span here.
Look at that, Sean. He pulled back from the profanity. He didn't.
I did. I don't like that one.
Drop the profanity. Okay, that's interesting.
I've got a lot more coming, I'm sure.
All right. Yeah, because we talked about this before. Like, they have this 9-game window where you're looking at the Jazz, the Hawks, the Lakers, the Magic, the Rockets, the Spurs, the Lakers, the Thunder, right? So 9 games. And so far they're 1-1. But for me, I really wanted to see 7-2 over that 9-game stretch. Maybe worst case scenario, 6-3. I think if you go 5-4, you're going to have a tough time making up those games later in the season. And I still think that they could go 7-2 over that stretch. They clearly can't go 9-0. But like, it just depends on who they are and like how they respond to a game like the Hawks game, where I think most of the guys coming out of that game were disappointed in the little mistakes that they made that didn't allow them to get over the hump, right? Like,
yeah, and it was easy, at least for myself, to forget that was the second night of a back-to-back. Maybe it's just because the other game was a road game, and then we're actually in the building the day after. But Domas played 39 minutes the night before, and then plays 40 the night after. Like, De'Aaron plays 38, and they need his heroics at the end of that game in Atlanta. And then the next night, he's playing 37 minutes. Like, I think when it comes to those errors they made at the end of the game, that they deservedly will get some crap for, because they both had pretty big blunders. But I think just the context of how tired they probably were. I think there was a point in that third quarter where you're just looking at the guys out there and they all look exhausted. So I think it was just a tiring couple days, but this Laker game is definitely a big one just from the aspect of them being in the middle of this stretch that we've already talked about the importance of it. I think that the 6-3, 7-2 hope is still a reasonable expectation or still in the cards at this point, because the Kings are a game behind the 4th seed, but they're also 2 games behind the 10 seed. And I think that's another thing that makes this stretch so important, is that you have an opportunity to try to solidify yourself as a little bit more of someone who belongs in this top 6. And I think that's still TBD, and maybe that changes as the year goes along, but like, this gives you an opportunity to really solidify yourself. So no Bron, no AD, or if there is no LeBron, no AD, just contain all-star candidate Austin Reeves, and hopefully you could beat the Lakers on a Saturday night.
You forgot all-star candidate Russell Westbrook. He too is well above De'Aaron Fox in the balloting. How do the Kings fix that? Like,
Get
I'll
their
tell
fans
you.
to vote.
Yeah, but when I was a kid, and I went to like a baseball game, and it was before the All-Star break, we had like, they give you like a stack of ballots, right? And you would sit there and like punch them out while you're watching the game. And the Kings used to do it. They used to go around with stacks of ballots, and people would be filling out ballots the entire game. That's not the way it works anymore. Like, you don't get paper ballots anymore. Are they doing enough in stadium? Because that's something that I don't even think I remember seeing. We have all these home games in December. All-Star balloting opened. I've seen it once or twice, but shouldn't they like do like a moment of silence where it's like they stop everything and they make everybody like sit there and fill out their ballot, and like a QR code on the screen, it goes right to the page. You sit there, you make your selections, and then we move on. We go on with the rest of the game. It feels like if you did that, clearly they haven't, because how many home games has they had? They've had 18,000 fans at 10 home games in the last 3 weeks, it feels like. You would actually be in the running if people were filling out their ballots in that way.
You'd be in the running if you had a successful team. I mean, you're doomed by your past failures is what it is. I mean, the reality is the Kings just aren't that much of a global team anymore, despite what some might tell you. So you have some nice players, you don't have global icons, and so that's the tough part. I will give a shout out to someone like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is like 3rd or 4th in voting out of OKC, but he's having a unbelievable year. He's having a tremendous individual success, so that falls under the All-Star. I mean, to give you like an example, like you're talking about Sabonis, I mean, again, he's probably the best opportunity for an All-Star, and I think coaches will reward that. And look, not to pour water all over De'Aaron Fox's season, but you talk about his season, he's putting up some really phenomenal numbers, but like, have you looked at scoring in the league right now? It's crazy. Like, he's averaging, I think, right a little over 23. That's not even in the top 10 in scoring. So point being is like, there's so many. I think you have like 6 dudes that are over 30 or right at 30, right? So I mean,
the scoring is crazy.
You're talking about when you come to all. He's 20. Sorry, I just looked. He's 21st in scoring at 23.9. So like, tell me who he's supposed to be. Again, I'm not trying to say he shouldn't be an all-star. It's why I tell people, like, it's really difficult for someone in Sacramento to all they have to do. And again, someone said their most media hates us. That's not the case. You're not a relevant team. This year you are. You haven't been for the past 16 years. So, to say that the media hates you, they don't hate you. You just have to become a relevant team. And even look at how hard it was for DeMarcus Cousins to make an all-star team. He was the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who had to put up incredible numbers. And the first year he did it, he almost didn't make it. So I mean, it's just really difficult unless you're a team that wins. You have to be able to win. And again, that's why I don't really concern myself with all-star stuff, because as someone pointed out, it is kind of like the Pro Bowl. It means a lot to Sacramento because Sacramento doesn't have a hell of a lot of success in anything. So having an all-star, they can hang their hat on that and feel good about themselves, but ultimately it doesn't matter. If you win, you get an all-star. So I don't know how it's going to make your life better, but these are some of the hurdles that are standing in the way.
Yeah, I'll say this. If they rattle off a bunch of wins right now and they get to, again, if they go 7-2 over the stretch, that means that they're going 6-1, which means they're 5 games over 500 over that stretch. They're 3 games over 500 right now. That puts them at 8 games over 500. If you're at 8 games over 500 at the end of January, or roughly around there, you're going to have a good shot to have an all-star, at least one. And the potential, if Fox puts on a show all month, he could potentially sneak in. But it's not going to be easy. Like what you talked about, he's like not a top 20 scorer in the league. He's also not top 20 in assists. He's like below the top 20. I mean, like, so statistically speaking, he's been really good, but like we're seeing this gaudy number system. I don't know how 5 guys are over 30 points per game. It's crazy.
Well, and the thing is, you're not going to get votes. I mean, we're talking all this time about, why is there not guys in the top 10 and you have someone like Austin Reeves in the top 10? It's because, you're in Los Angeles. It's such a bigger market where it's a global team and people vote all over the place. That's not how you make the All-Star team. You make an All-Star team as a reserve by coaches who pick your roster and and look, I'm telling you right now, Domantas Sabonis will be a lock if they continue on and he doesn't get hurt. If everything stays the same and he doesn't get hurt, he's your All-Star. If you can creep up to a 4 or 5, whatever, and hopefully Fox can continue on those numbers, I could see coaches voting for him. I really could, but that's where your All-Star is made. So for people who get real bent out of shape about the voting, it just kind of is what it is right now.
And despite filling out those paper ballots, I never remember Wayman Tisdale being an All-Star. It didn't matter how many you filled out. Like, you could go dump 100 in the box. It didn't matter. Like, Sacramento never got...
Mitch got there.
Mitch got there, but that was it.
And an MVP.
All-Star MVP.
Brenden, Mitch is Mitch Richmond. His number 2 hangs from the rafters.
I got you there.
Okay.
Mitch Richmond was a
we
shooting guard.
don't need this for basketball.
First for the Golden State Warriors, and then traded for the draft rights of Billy Owens. Went on to win 8-time All-Star, I think.
6, I think.
A Hall of Famer?
But Hall of Famer, yeah.
Only 6? Huh. Okay, Brenden, you were about to say something. We cut you off.
No, you're good. I'm with Sean. Like, I think that Domas should, at this point, I'd be surprised if he wasn't in the All-Star game. Like, I think that the story of how much he's been an essential part of Sacramento turning this around, being such an offensive kind of powerhouse in the league, and just the way that they're able to play, everything totally revolves around him. The steep drop-off when he comes off the floor, I think, in a way, helps people understand just the total impact that he has. But the scoring number is going to keep going up if he continues at his recent rate. But right now he's just under 19 points, leading the league with 12.5 rebounds, 6.7 assists, like on 62% from the field. Like, those are easily all-star numbers. And it's 3 backcourt players starting. 3 front court players starting and 3 front court players on the bench, compared to 2 backcourt starting and 2 on the bench. And that in itself makes it an easier case for Domas than De'Aaron. And outside of those starter and bench, there's also 2 reserve spots that could be any position.
Large, yeah.
Yeah, so to me, like, Domas should totally be in there. Obviously, the Kings have to maintain winning some games here, and I would think that this stretch would be a good opportunity to do that. And De'Aaron outside shot with probably injury replacements in my mind.
How crazy would it be to see both Sabonis and Tyrese Halliburton in the All-Star game?
Tyrese is a fake All-Star, so.
Wally Zerbiak. By the way, it did come up on that. I was watching a little bit of the blowout that was the Nuggets and the Clippers, and they were finding something to talk about. And Reggie Miller was talking about they spent a good time talking about Sacramento and the success that they've found this season, the relevancy, and even all-star stuff. So, they went down, and Reggie Miller had shouted out Sabonis, obviously, and then obviously Halliburton as well. And it made me think, like, go back to that trade. It's like, when's there been a trade where 2 dudes were traded for each other, made the all-star team like that? Like, I'm sure it's happened. I think maybe the Kyrie Irving, one of the Kyrie Irving trades or the James Harden trades, maybe something like that. But I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think fans need to be realistic about it. It's going to be tough to get 2 All-Stars in either way. But that doesn't mean you should stop voting, right? You should, if you do want to get your guys in there, they do need to show up in the top 10. I think the one thing, just to like finish up this topic on the All-Star possibility, the one thing that could separate Fox is the fourth quarter. Like they are doing Mr. Clutch this year. It's a new award by the NBA. I don't know if it's called Mr. Clutch, but the clutch player.
Jerry West Award.
Oh, is that what it's called? The Jerry West Clutch Performance Award or something?
I forget the full name, but Jerry West is the face of it.
He's okay. Well, that makes sense. He's the face of a lot of things in the NBA. Yeah, like Fox's his ability to close out a game, his ability to score in the fourth quarter. Like I think I'm as guilty as anyone of getting annoyed with the fact that he scores all these points in the fourth quarter, but leaves the first quarter with like 2 or 4. Should there be more of a smoothing out of his stats? Or are you guys okay with like the Kings having basically one of the best closers in the NBA and a guy that, again, we just talked about a few minutes ago, Kings won 3 out of 4 and by a total of 4 points. They don't win any of those games without De'Aaron Fox being De'Aaron Fox in those games. And the one game here that against Atlanta, he had a couple of slip-ups in the fourth. He missed a couple of shots. He had the big turnover. Like, if he was the same player he was the night before, you win that game. I mean, that's if he would hit those shots.
I think that De'Aaron and Domas are always going to be able to just turn it on in the fourth quarter. And I think that they need other guys to be on as well, but that takes them having a good game prior to that. And to me, like what I see first quarters and halves with De'Aaron is just more of him trying to get his teammates involved because he needs somebody else. Like Jordy Fernandez was talking about the X factor of the team being, you don't know who the third guy is going to be on any given night, but somebody has to emerge as that third guy. Sometimes it's 15 from one, 15 from another, and kind of 2 guys combined to be that sort of typical X factor third option. But to me, and maybe I'm just overthinking this, but I feel like De'Aaron is just trying to get his teammates a little bit more involved because he can just flip that switch when it comes to late games, even if he hasn't had a great game prior to that. And I think that's a little bit more difficult for other guys, but if they've had opportunity to get touches, see some shots go down, that it makes things a little bit easier on himself.
Yeah, I mean, it's been who he is. So we talk about him not keeping his foot on the gas oftentimes in seasons past, and I think this is the most consistent he's been in the season thus far. There hasn't really been there's been a little bit of a lull at one point, but it's not the one that lasts for maybe 10, 12 games and, where he's got to try to find his way again. He really gets hot in January. I mean, it's something we've seen in years past. I think last year is when he didn't until right before the All-Star break, if I remember correctly. But, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. That's just kind of who he is. He's always risen to the occasion in fourth quarter. He recognizes the moment and for whatever reason has some slow starts or just doesn't have the same sense of urgency, and it's what makes him kind of a little bit of a frustrating player for a lot of people. But it also is just who he is. Everyone has their own DNA and characteristics, and this is who he is. He's shown you he's this type of player since he got into the league, and here he is so many years later, and he's still rising to the occasion and trying to meet the moment in the fourth quarter. So it's hard to impose a will on a player to be different and be something that they're not. So that's why getting somebody like Sabonis was so crucial to taking that type of pressure away from him. And now that you have the two of them together, you're seeing some really good things. I just think that right now I'm okay with it so long as you're winning. You have a winning record. But you really hope to be able to double down on some of the success in this month of January. And we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, it's big. I mean, I think it's interesting too if you look at it. The 3 kind of disappointing games at home over the last couple of weeks, all 3 are Eastern Conference opponents. I think the Kings have showed up really well against the West, like as of late. Sure, they lost 1 to Denver, but they beat Denver. They beat Utah twice. I think they beat the Lakers. I think the one crucial thing about Saturday's game is it's kind of like what you had with Utah. You had an ability to maybe turn Utah from a playoff contender to a seller at the deadline. And I kind of feel like the same thing with the Lakers. You have an opportunity here to kind of put the Lakers away. Like, not fully. They still have LeBron. AD will be back eventually. But at like 17 and 20, like, the further under 500 you can get that team and a team like Utah, the better it is for you as a team that's looking to make the postseason. And so I think that this is one of those games where I'm not going to like say this is a must-win game, but it's a big game against a Western Conference opponent, a division rival, where, you know, if you hit this team the right way, you could help spiral them and put them in a place where they don't want to be, and that's out of the playoffs again.
And you could help spark your own run in the process.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. All right. Well, we haven't taken a lot of questions, so before we start like closing this thing down, if you guys have any questions, why don't you throw them in the chat? Again, we're doing a live show tonight for those of you who are listening the day after, or the day after that. But we are doing a show on YouTube. If you are watching still, give us a thumbs up if you don't mind. Subscribe to the King's Beat podcast, and that would be cool. Devin, if you have a suggestion for a guest for the happy hour, like we plan on doing happy hours like once a month or once every 5 or 6 weeks, just depends on how crazy the schedule is. But if you have a suggestion, go ahead and throw it out there. Let's see. I don't know the answer to that.
Michael Jordan being thrown around. That's a good get.
Yeah. Can you get him? No.
By the way, I have a candle lit. See that? We've been going through quite a bit of these Japanese cherry blossom. How about that?
This is random by Sean.
Yeah. What?
It's because it smells really good. It was just sitting here. I was like, I better turn this shit on because it really smells good. And I'm enjoying King's Chat by candlelight.
How are my 7 boats? My 3 boats, which aren't technically all 3 mine, but the speedboat took on a little water. We had to go do some work and save it because the lake has risen like so much because of the rain. I went down to check on it, and the dock that my boat is on, which is not my dock, it was about 8 inches underwater. So I literally had to kick my shoes off, pull my sweatpants up, and go climb in the water and freezing cold water to make sure the boat was going to survive. Yep. So
we live different lives, my guy. We do. Has anybody on this chat have you been impacted by the weather? My candle went out because I moved around the wax, so I got to relight it. So hopefully we can find out if
Sean is having weird random candle issues.
We did. We had my roommate had all.
We will find out later
around,
that Sean is actually in a bathtub right now, just with a sweatshirt on.
That is not true. You see it. It's a lot of
Sean
wax, evidently, though. I didn't know you couldn't tilt the... Okay, good. No, I should be drunk, Almir. I think I hope I said your name right. I should be drunk right about now.
We've lost our mind. We'll be... oh, yeah, Coach Molly said my patio umbrellas got knocked over twice.
We will rebuild.
Yeah, patio umbrellas. You know, years ago, I bought one of those heaters that you put outside. Has anyone ever had one of those heaters, like the big heater with the discs up on top, that hasn't fallen over in the wind and got completely bent and destroyed? Because that's all that seems to happen with those things. I don't know. Okay, well, if you guys don't have any reasonable questions outside of whether Sean can light a candle or not,
you got him back. We're back. We're lit.
Struggling.
Okay, we'll answer this one. 40-20. Let's see. We'll pull this up. Brenden, I'm just going to put it right over your face, and then you can answer it.
You can read it out loud for the...
Go ahead.
Would Sasha Vezenkov get quality minutes? I think that he would get Trey Lyles minutes at first, that sort of range. And it's a pretty impossible question to answer. I think he's a very, very good offensive player. I think that he's a mess defensively.
A mess.
But I think he's extremely smart on offense. And I think that he for sure would be given an opportunity. But it's so hard to predict how a guy's skill set would translate, especially when it's, such different usages that we'd be talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys have been watching what's going on over there, but first of all, he signed a new contract with which I think we're still confused whether he can get out of or not. But he also he's blowing up as far as like a European player. He's in the running for MVP, and the Kings have had like Bogdanovich was an MVP in Europe before he came over. Nemanja Bjelica won a MVP at Fenerbahce. The Kings passed on Luka Doncic, and he too was an MVP in Europe. So there's potential that the Kings could have had three separate EuroLeague MVPs. But when I see Vezenkov, like I don't know, like could he average 12 points a game, maybe like 3 or 4 rebounds as like a quality like bench like 4-5. I don't even know if he can play the 5 at all, but I don't think he can play the 3 at the NBA level. He's not Bojan Bogdanovic. Like when I watch him,
year one would be a whole lot of question marks, and I think it's something you'd have to get a lot figured out in training camp, and then hopefully by the end of year one, you have a little bit. You have some data that you can have an idea of where he fits in. So I think even no matter where he came over, that first year is kind of a little bit to develop, see how he fits in, because as James alluded to, you can get guys that come over here who were really good over there and not amount to anything over in the NBA. So a lot of it has to do with opportunity, and clearly if he can play the way he does in Europe and that can translate to the US, well then certainly the minutes would be there for him. But as Brenden talked about him being a mess defensively, he doesn't strike me. To me, it's not so much the defense. I'm questioning how physical he is. Can he withstand the physicality of the NBA? Typically, it's gotten better with a lot of European players over the past year or past few years, because that used to be a huge knock and stereotype of European players when they come into the NBA, that the physicality isn't there. That doesn't seem to be an issue so much more anymore. But for him, it's definitely one that I'd like to have a question that I'd like to get answered.
yeah. So right now in the EuroLeague, he also played in the GBL. Before that, the Greek Basketball League for 9 games. But then that his team goes and plays in the EuroLeague. He's averaging 19.2 points, 7.1 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.3 steals. He's shooting 44.9% from 3 and 59.7% overall, and that's all in a little bit less than 30 minutes. And the first 9 games of the season in the GBL, he was shooting 64.3% from 3. So he's at least intriguing as like an offensive weapon. He is a smart player. Like he is a hustle guy, and like I don't want to say he's physical, but I would say physical in a Dellavedova way where he doesn't mind like mixing it up a little. I don't know. Like he'd at least be fun, but I worry that he's gonna look at that contract that Bogdanovic got a few years ago when he decided to come over as a 24-year-old, where he got a 3-year, $27 million contract from the Kings. And that ain't happening. Not at least that I can tell. Like the Kings are not going to go that way. I think you make a nice backup and probably a guy that you would count on a little bit more right now while Keegan Murray is young. But 2 years from now, he could be in the same position that everyone not named Domantas Sabonis is at the center position, where you're going to play 12 minutes a game, 14 minutes a game as a backup 4 or 3 for this team if he's there. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think he's a little intriguing at very least. Like he reminds me of Bielitsa a lot. I think just being a good shooter, but I think people that watch Bielitsa a lot could also grow to appreciate just how smart he was and capable of putting the ball on the floor and good touch around the rim, and just making that nice extra pass. So I think it seems to be like a lot of that just little stuff, and pretty overall smart basketball player that understands the game really well and is able to kind of execute that on offense.
Okay, good question. How many non-Kings games do you guys watch, all three of you?
Too many. Way too many.
It's, I don't know, 5 a week.
5 non-Kings games?
Yeah, something like that. And usually it's probably like watching a half of the game rather than the whole game.
I don't know. Probably around that. I don't know, 4 or 5. I don't know that I don't watch games all day long every day. I mean, like, we are literally there at the arena like way too much to watch like 47 games a week.
Oh,
Okay.
I record a lot and fast forward a bunch, so it's
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. There was another one. Do we think this will be a noisy or a quiet trade deadline? I think that's what it was. Yeah, here we go. From Daniel.
How do you
Active
remember-
trade deadline or relatively quiet one?
League wide?
League wide. We can do both. Kings.
I think this one's an interesting one because if we fast forward a month from now, almost to the date is when the trade deadline is, and if everyone's bunched up like this, I think you could expect quite a bit. I was, again, not to allude back to Reggie Miller's comments in the TNT broadcast tonight, but he's kind of right. Like, if you're the Lakers, you're thinking as long as you can get in to the 10th seed, you're feeling pretty good about yourselves in the way that everyone's kind of shaped in. And if you're healthy at the right time, what's that look like? And if you can add to your team, what's that look like? So, basically 1 through 10, everyone's probably feeling pretty good about themselves in terms of being able to compete and kind of see where the chips fall. And, if you saw Stan Van Gundy on NBA TV yesterday talking about really how this year more than most feel like a little bit like the NCAA tournament. The only problem is they're not one and done. So, it's not one games, like you've got series. And that's why, I've said the thing I really like about Sacramento is the quality depth that they've added. So, like, to me, if this feels like a team that can really give some fits to a certain amount of teams in the West in a series, like, this is not a team I'd want to face in a playoff series. One-offs being what they are, but in a playoff series, especially with the way they like to run, and the efficiency that they play with, it could be tough.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an active trade deadline. I think the Kings will be active. I would predict like one moderate move. Like, I don't know, nothing wild and crazy, but like I think that they'll at least pick up a player or two. I don't think they'll swing for the fences. I don't think they want to disrupt the unity of the team.
I like that Brendan's
laugh?
eyebrows have become a topic of conversation.
Oh,
It's
oh,
adorbs.
Brenden.
I don't know that I believe quiet deadlines exist anymore. Maybe I'm not remembering well too many years back, but I swear every deadline is fireworks nowadays in the NBA. Every deadline is something crazy. Every offseason is something crazy. I think there's a lot of teams kind of teetering that you could see what direction are they going to commit. Chicago is a place that if they decided to become sellers, what does that look like? Is Levine someone that could be moved on from? DeRozan, Vucevic, I think there's a handful of guys there. Patrick Williams is somebody that'd be intriguing to me from Sacramento's point of view. There's a lot of teams in the West, like Utah that we've just seen. Minnesota, could they become desperate? Like, I think that I don't know that quiet deadlines exist anymore. At this point, I'm always expecting there to be at least like one big move and a lot of typical other moves thrown in there as well. And I think the Kings will do something. I think that I could see a world where there is a big move to try and go get that third guy to complete your sort of 3 all-stars and maybe go with a little bit of a 3-headed snake sort of build path, but I think it could also just be something marginal. Like Richaun Holmes seems like the most obvious guy to me that you try to move on from. Harrison Barnes, you have to make a decision on. So I'd expect the Kings to do something, and I think league-wide there will definitely be a good bit of movement.
Let me ask you this, though. Just not trying to hate here, but what team do you think looks at Richaun Holmes and goes, that's what I need right there?
Oh, I don't think that there's one that jumps out anymore at all. Like a year ago, sure. But right now, I think you're in a position where the Kings have tried to at least build some value, and I don't think that that's worked very well. I think where Richaun Holmes actually makes sense, and it sounds very strange, but in a team that has like a 2 or 3 year build in front of them, and they're like, we're going to need at least a couple of guys making 10 to 12 million bucks a year. And, he's a guy that can work with younger players. He's a guy that, will be okay in the pick and roll. But, the only ones that really stand out are teams like Toronto, who's had interest in him before, Charlotte, that's had interest in him before. And even those, like, I don't know that it works.
I'm even looking. Yeah. I'm looking at the. Megan says Chicago. I disagree. Mavs, not a chance. Indiana, hell no. They'd rather just keep. I mean, why? Yeah, you can extend Miles Turner. Why the hell would you get Richaun Holmes?
Now Chicago had interest last year.
But if you're blowing that up,
but they're never going to blow it up completely. So if you're trying to go out and
it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, I mean, I could see.
I mean, they just went all in with all those players, and it's. I don't know. I just, again, he's got a lot of money that's still attached to him. It's not a lot of money, but a lot of money considering the type of player he is right now. And I don't know. Detroit, not a chance. Thunder, I don't see that either. Houston, I don't. Like, I'm sorry. I just disagree with all of them. I literally can't think of a situation where I go, he'd make a lot of sense.
Well, it's places that like need a backup center, and the Kings need a backup center, and clearly he can't fill that role. Like, I think it's ideally just a team that's running a totally different scheme and asking different things. I think it has to be a team that just runs a lot of pick and roll and switches on defense. But even that switching on defense has become more and more questionable with Richaun. Like, it's tough, but like obviously from Sacramento's point of view, that's the guy that you're just listening to everything on, I would assume.
Yeah. Okay. The baby daddy. Has anyone asked Alex Lynn how he's doing?
I'm sorry. Who asked this question again?
The baby daddy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like you guys know he's always in here. I just like to hear you call his name. I've asked Alex Len a couple of times. Like, I've checked in on him. I don't want to bug him, and I know that there might be someone who's writing a story on some of the things that are going on behind the scenes with him. It's not good. So, like, I talk to him. Like, he's always in the locker room. He's one of the few players in pregame that's always in the locker room. And there have been multiple times where I go over and just check on him because I know he's got a lot of crap going on behind the scenes. He's very, very concerned that there is no power or gas in Ukraine for the winter. And a lot of people that freeze to death. He's very concerned about that. He also has family members he has not been able to get a hold of in 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And he doesn't know if they're alive or if they've had to move or where they are or what's going on with them. So, like, he's pretty stressed at all times. He's got a lot on his mind. And, like, we deal with these guys all the time. They're just people. They're just normal, everyday people. Alex Lynn has always struck me as a very nice guy. I don't hang out with him off the court, so I don't know all the ins and outs. But, there's a lot of things going on in that guy's head. And it's tough. He's in a bad situation. Let's see. Do we have anything else?
James, you saw the menu, right?
I saw the menu. I enjoyed it. Like, I don't think it's like Oscar, but and it had some holes. Like, Sean definitely pointed out some holes in the plot, but I still enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. Like, it's like dark, really, really dark. We will not be having Leo Diaz for the happy hour. Just saying.
Probably not.
Probably not. Like good old Leo. What is Richaun Holmes' contract? Holmes is under contract next year at 11.6, maybe 11.8, and he's under contract the next year at slightly more than that. He has a player option for that fourth year, but he ain't opting out of that player option. There ain't no way at 31 years old he's giving up that much money, or 30, whatever. He's 29 right now.
What did you guys think of Keegan getting picked on yesterday?
I think it's something that a lot of teams have tried to do. It's also why you didn't see a lot of him in the first. Like they subbed him out for a long, long time. In that first half, I wondered where he went. But
you know what I would have liked to have seen? This is sort of strangely off topic, but when they played Memphis, they tried to defend him with Ja. Why didn't they just go to Keegan in the post like 8 times in a row and just torch that guy? I mean, like Ja just can't. He's not big enough to go in there and play with Keegan, and Keegan is very good in the post. Let's see. Have you seen the new Avatar, Sean?
No, I have not.
Why didn't you ask
me? I saw the first one. Did you?
No.
Wait,
what's the last movie you saw?
Glass Onion.
Oh,
okay.
Nice. Someone asked when the fedora's coming back. I've got the right here.
Ask and ye shall receive.
Yeah, it's always sitting right next to me.
Always.
No, it is. It's on the shelf, like literally right next to me, like on the shelf. Yeah, Brendan ain't seen shit. That's true, by Steve Brown. Facts, to quote
That's
Buddy
true.
Hield. Facts.
That's a hell of an avatar he's got there too. Speaking of avatars.
Okay. I don't think we have much else going on here. Let's switch up and go to final thoughts then. Robert Foster, Naz Reid would be an interesting backup 5 for the Kings. And if Minnesota decides to blow things up, then sure. All right, let's go to final thoughts. Brenden, what do you got for final thought?
The latest episode of The Run came out today. I'm only actually halfway through it, but just...
You fell asleep.
It's got to be at least 6 minutes long. Couldn't get all the way through it.
Jay Triano has another hilarious moment with the mannequin. Jay Triano is definitely a character. And just big shout out to the whole video team. I think that The Run is so well put together. All the clips that they're shooting, doing all the editing for. It's not the most... I forget what game it ends on, but you're going back a little bit in the season. But I think the video team does such a good job of putting this whole thing together. Super entertaining. So definitely check that out.
Sean, what do you got for us?
Oh, I don't know. I think I hit them all. I haven't seen much that I haven't gotten to yet. So no really final thoughts. I'll just echo what Brenden said, and hope that if we do get our happy hour in the future, still holding out hope that we get to do it in person over some beverages. And whether we do a show or not, we could just encourage those people to show up, and we'll just shoot the shit.
That's a good idea. Let's see. I was sitting here we had the podcast on Monday, and I was sitting here like so many other people watching Monday Night Football. Just huge thoughts and prayers to DeMar Hamlin. Absolutely horrific thing to watch on a court. Unfortunately, covering the NBA, we've had the opportunity to cover some massive injuries. Like Rudy Gay, like the Rudy Gay injury was one of the worst things. Like just because we knew Rudy really well, and watching him go down like that was horrible. The Vince Carter situation where he accidentally clubbed Patrick McCaw up when he was in the air, that was bad. I was in Toronto when Kevin Durant blew his Achilles, and the fans in Toronto at what is that, the Air Canada Center?
Bank.
Oh, Scotiabank now. Yes, it is Scotiabank. They started cheering. That was bad. But rarely do you see something so horrific on the field as watching what we saw. So I hope everything works out for him. 24-year-old guy. The GoFundMe thing is really inspiring. It's up at like 7.7 million. His GoFundMe for his after school and like toy drive stuff. So pretty amazing. But no one wants to see that happen at all, and so hopefully we get to see a recovery. That would be amazing. Outside of that, I think that's going to do it.
James'
we're
final
good.
thoughts always bring me down.
They do. They bring you down. Well,
It just
I
brings me
intend to.
down. But
I intend to bring everyone down. I'm morbid. I am. I have a morbid, and my 15-year-old has the same exact morbid sense of like just about him. So it is what it is. Okay. Outside of that, what do we got? We've got 2 podcasts next week. We got Sacramento Kings taking on the Los Angeles Lakers on Saturday. Should be a good game. Make sure you get your tickets. If you haven't got your tickets, you probably aren't getting tickets to that Lakers game, because the Kings are riding, 9 straight sellouts. It's been a lot of fun. The crowds have been amazing. But come out and watch the Kings. Come out and watch the beam get lit, because that will probably happen. Okay, so for Fox 40's Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast, I am James Ham, your Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Thanks for tuning in to this live show. Give us a thumbs up, rating, review. Have a good weekend. Stay safe, and we'll see you around.